Jai Hind, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are back at our Thursday lecture. As the evolution and development of conventional warfare had already taken the world by storm, each passing day new dimensions are being added. With the concept of informal wars emerging, today we are at war with friends and foes at the same time in multiple domains. We are very fortunate to Gen Hooda, who has kindly accepted to educate us on the emerging threats of informal warfare, because as I visualize in coming days, this will be the major focus areas. The country has to grapple with this kind of challenge and go into the doctrines, policies, and other formulations, including as to how this has to be meshed with the conventional conflicts which we have been fighting so far. So with that observation, I shall request my colleague Arizita to introduce the speaker, and then I'll request the speaker to take the stage.
Thank you, sir. Our speaker for today is Lieutenant General Deependra Singh Hooda, Param Vishesh Seva Medal, Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, Ati Vishesh Seva Medal, Vishesh Seva Medal and Bar 8D Camp, who was commissioned into the 4th Battalion of the 4th Gorkha Rifles on 15th December 1976. During the massive earthquake of Jammu and Kashmir in 2005, he led the military's rescue and relief efforts in the Uri sector. As a Major General in Manipur, he was responsible for counter-insurgency operations in Manipur and South Assam. From 2012 to 2016, he was stationed in Jammu and Kashmir, first as Corps Commander and then as the Army Commander of the Northern Command. In this assignment, he handled numerous strategic challenges along the borders both with Pakistan and China. He planned and supervised the successful surgical strikes into Pakistan in September 2016. He retired in November 2016 after 40 years of service with the Indian Army. Lieutenant General Hooda is also the co-founder of the Council of Strategic and Defense Research, a new Delhi-based think tank, and a senior fellow at the Delhi Policy Group. He has been a regular contributor to newspapers, online media portals, and professional journals on national and international affairs. The floor is all yours, sir.
So thank you very much. Thank you, CENJOWS, for inviting me for this talk. Let me just start by saying I was a little intrigued by the topic that was given by CENJOWS, which is to talk about informal wars. So frankly, this is not a universally sort of recognized term, but I assume we're talking of operations, activities that don't translate into a full-blown conventional war between two states. So let me just start by saying, some of the terminologies that are used in strategic circles around the world. You have irregular warfare, which is primarily non-state actors, insurgents, fighting against state forces. So we also call it insurgencies. Then we have terminologies like unconventional warfare, which is primarily covert operations, support to resistance movements, acts of subversion, etc. Another term that is popular, particularly in the Indian circles, is proxy war. So what we say is that what we are facing in Jammu and Kashmir is actually proxy warfare, which is a state using proxies like terrorists, various organizations that are operating, Lt, Jaish-e-Mohammed, etc. And the states are carrying out proxy warfare without getting directly involved themselves in a conventional to conventional fight. Then, of course, there is low intensity conflict, which is again organized violence, which is short of war. We have terms like hybrid warfare, which is a combination of military force with irregular tactics. So you are blurring the line between covert operations and overt operations. So it's a mix of conventional and unconventional forces to fight warfare. And finally, a term that is gaining more and more popularity, and which I am going to be sort of focusing on, is what we call gray zone warfare. And these are activities that sort of fall between peace and open hostilities. And these are gray zone warfare is something that uses all instruments of national power, so economic coercion, cyber, information warfare. And it's not as if military force is not used, but it's used in an incremental manner so that you try and keep the threshold below an all-out war. And why I say I think this is something that we need to, in India, look at more seriously, because these are activities that are designed to achieve political or security objectives of nations without crossing into the threshold of formal conflict. And I will give examples of this as I go along. So broadly, what are the characteristics of gray zone warfare? The first is, there is ambiguity and there is deniability. Attribution is difficult. If you look at what the Chinese are, for example, doing in South China Sea, one of the tactics that they employ to establish their control over maritime territories, disputed maritime territories, is by sending in very large civilian fishing fleets. And they will go into these disputed areas. These are fishing fleets that are protected by their Coast Guard. So they say, look, we are only here to protect our people. We are not using military. And it becomes difficult for other nations on how to respond. Are we going to start firing at civilian fishing fleets? Are we going to cause civilian casualties? And the Chinese government will say, look, these are merely civilian fishermen going to their traditional fishing area. So we have nothing to do with it. As I said, it is calibrated to avoid escalation. And so more often than not, you will find a prolonged but very gradual escalation. So inching forward, as we use the term sort of salami slicing for activities that the PLA does, along our LAC. As I said, multiple tools are used. You will use political pressure, you will use economic coercion, cyber attacks, and it is not as if military force is not used at all, but is used in an incremental and limited way. As I said, the whole idea is to keep activities below a level that they don't escalate it to a sort of a full-blown war. One key element of gray zone warfare is strategic messaging and information warfare. So you will find these activities accompanied by massive campaigns of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, psychological operations. And the whole idea is to influence decision makers, sort of confuse them into what is it that and how is it that we are supposed to react. It is also meant to influence public opinion, both in your own country to support the activities that are happening, also to influence public opinion in the adversary country. And again, I will talk about this a little more in detail, and also to bring international opinion on their side. So there is a very massive information warfare element to gray zone warfare. And the whole idea is avoid direct full-scale conflict, but gradually shift the balance of power in your favor. And so these are activities, as I said, which transcend activities between peace and war. And I think if you want to study gray zone warfare, I think the most classic example that you can get is the Russian annexation of Crimea in 2014. I think there are so many lessons to be learned from this, and it is something that any student of gray zone unconventional warfare must look at in great detail. And I will talk a little about this, just to tell you how this annexation went. So towards the end of February 2014, Ukraine was in the grip of a massive political crisis. So you all heard about the Euromaidan that happened. The Ukrainian president had to flee the country. And so there was a great deal of political turmoil that was happening. Crimea, which was part of Ukraine, is an area which is 60% ethnic Russians. And so there was already some advantage that Russia had. And over a period of time, Russian intelligence agencies had built up very strong relation with the pro-Russian groups in Crimea. And when this crisis started in Ukraine, massive information campaigns started, narratives around local grievances, threats to Russian-speaking population, and the fact that the new government in Ukraine was illegitimate, had been foisted by the West, and therefore there was threat to the Russian people in Crimea. It was at that time that massive mobilization of forces, Russian forces, was carried out along the Ukraine border in the garb of, look, we are only carrying out military exercises that had already been planned earlier. And the whole idea was to distract both Ukrainian and international attention away from what would happen in Crimea. On 23rd February, Russia engineered very large-scale pro-Russian protests in Crimea. And 4 days after this, February 27th, February 28th, we find unidentified armed men. Now, terminology used for them is little green men, who seized the parliament building, occupied major airports, and established roadblocks. Now, these were people without any official insignia. So they were wearing green uniforms, which is why they were called little green men. They were all masked. And Russia said, look, these are not our regular soldiers, although these were regular special forces, and there are other military people who had gone in, not in very large numbers. As this was going on, the Russian naval fleet blockaded all the ports, sort of bottling up whatever Ukrainian military forces there were. And then there were massive sort of cyber attacks, which shut down Ukrainian websites, cut off all communications. So the Ukrainian military that was there was sort of unable to communicate with their headquarters. Also, the Russians attempted a very large-scale defection campaign. That, look, you guys who are here, the Ukrainian soldiers, the population is against you. So there were some defections from the Ukrainian military that happened. When this was happening on the 4th of March, President Putin held a press conference, and he said there are no Russian soldiers on Crimean soil. We have no plans to annex Crimea. And he said this at a time when a small number of regular soldiers, as I said, in the garb of, these are not regular soldiers, were already on Crimean soil. There was a massive information campaign saying there are no soldiers in Crimea, and also signaling a desire to de-escalate. We don't want to annex Crimea. We want the escalation to ease. However, if Crimea on its own wishes to join Russia, then it's the choice of the people. And I think it was this information campaign, and I said it meant to target decision makers, that completely confused the US and NATO. And literally, there was a decision-making paralysis on how is it that we should respond to this. There was also the threat of large Russian forces along the Ukrainian border carrying out an exercise. So should we escalate? Should we not escalate this issue? In this confusion, on March 6th, the Crimean Parliament announced a referendum, that we will carry out a referendum amongst our people on whether they want to remain with Ukraine or they want to join Russia. 10 days later, this referendum was held on March 16th among very heavy military presence, and Crimea voted to join Russia. 2 days later, Russia and Crimea signed a treaty of accession. Now, all this happens in less than 1 month. Not a single soldier, Russian soldier, suffers. Zero casualties among the Russian military. So a completely bloodless takeover of Crimea. So as I said, I have explained it briefly, but for those of you who are sort of more interested in looking at how gray zone warfare can play out, I mean, as I said, this is one classic example of how it happens. There are also the way the Chinese have been doing this. If you look at South China Sea, and I'll come to the Indian example a little later. If you see it, what they have been doing in South China Sea, building islands, as I said, sending fishing fleets into disputed territories, and slowly over a period of time, they have expanded their presence in South China Sea in disputed areas without getting into any sort of physical military-to-military confrontation with countries like Philippines, Vietnam, Japan, etc. Should we in India be concerned about gray zone warfare? Are we facing gray zone warfare? And the answer for me is an unqualified yes. And let's look at both what's happening with China and what is happening with Pakistan. So when you look at the LAC, we know it's a disputed border. But if you look at the Chinese narrative, they say legally that whatever we are doing, whatever we are claiming, is our own territory. Even if you see in 2020, when they carried out incursions across the LAC, they tailored it in the garb of, look, what we are doing is in our own territory, and it's India who's the aggressor. So they take this sort of semi-legal route to say, we are only doing what is rightfully ours and doing it in our territory. You have this term salami slicing, incremental advances, small encroachments are carried out, and the whole idea is over a period of time attempt to change the status quo. And again, 2020 is an example of this. It did not fully succeed, but the whole idea, the standoff that went on for more than 4 years, was an attempt to change the status quo along the line of actual control. And they're able to do this because over a period of time, they have built this massive infrastructure across the LAC that supports these kinds of activities, that where you are able to encroach into areas that you want, because the infrastructure, road network, military capacity to back it up in terms of logistics, air bases, helipads, etc., has massive expansion in Tibet. If you recall, in 2018, a Chinese road building team with some, I think, JCBs, excavators, was found 1 kilometer inside our territory in the Tooting sector. And although the matter was resolved after discussion, the Chinese said, look, these were civilian road building activity, and they were just constructing some roads by mistake. They have come into our area. When I was in Ladakh, when I was the army commander in 2015, we saw some similar attempt. Bring in some dozers and say, look, these are only civilians. We are not doing this. But because in some cases our infrastructure is not very good, our observation along the LAC was not that good, that these things then become fait accompli. The status quo is changed, that look, we've had a road here, and we are seeing that in what they're doing in attempting to settle civilian population along the LAC. So you have this massive push for villages. Most of them are currently unoccupied. But again, this is an attempt to try and say and give legal control over these territories. Fortunately, none of these are on our side of the LAC. But if you look at Bhutan, in the Chumbi Valley, so number of villages have come up in territories that were disputed between Bhutan and China. And the whole idea is to pressurize Bhutan into accepting their terms. And slowly, over a period of time, if these villages do get occupied, people come in and settle there, it just strengthens their claim over these areas. If you look at the framework of agreement between India and China on how to settle final settlement of the border, one of the points that is given there is that we will take into consideration settled population while finally deciding on the border. And so if you have a civilian population settled close to across the LAC in your areas, it just strengthens your case that this area traditionally has been ours. If you look at their tactics in 2020, when they came in, there was massive violence. Force was used, but I think that they were using clubs, batons, electric batons, did not use weapons, and sometimes that complicates how we respond to it. I mean, if you look at Galwan, we suffered 20 deaths, but we said no, but neither side fired. Weapons were not used. So the tactics that you use, also trying to keep it in some way, show that it is limited and controlled, does complicate the adversary's response of how do we respond to this. What we also saw, and this is my personal observation, the 2020 incursions and the period that followed, there was a massive social media campaign. And if some of you would go into details of the Doklam incident, which is also, I think, more than a 70-day standoff, and compare it with what happened in 2020, you will find that the use of social media by China was hardly anything in Doklam, but very, very massive in the 2020 crisis that erupted. And as I said, the whole campaign was, look, we are only defending our own territorial sovereignty, and India has been the aggressor, not us. That is the whole social media theme around what happened and what has happened in 2020. If you look at Pakistan, you will find that again there is an element of gray zone warfare. Clearly, there is use of proxy forces. Pakistan says, "Look, we don't control terrorist activity in Jammu and Kashmir." There is a very common theme. So whenever we used to have meetings at the border between Indian and Pakistan military officials, and we used to talk to them about infiltration, the standard reply without fail was, there is no infiltration from our side. Whatever is happening on your side of the line of control is because of resistance movements among the local population on your side. So complete deniability about anything that they were doing as far as Jammu Kashmir is concerned. There is a very tailored and very sophisticated propaganda campaign that is happening about human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir. Consistent theme, whether it's the political leaders, whether it is the military leaders, whether it is other activists on social media, the constant theme is the Indian military is carrying out massive human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir. And the whole idea is to, one, internationalize the whole dispute, undermine India's internal security in Jammu and Kashmir, while avoiding any kind of open conflict with India. So these are some of the challenges that we are facing, and so that's why we say the situation as far as Pakistan is concerned is what is termed by the Indian Army as no war, no peace. And so clearly there is elements of gray zone warfare. And let me now come to the last part of my talk, and which is, how do we fight this? What is it that we need to do? And firstly, I would say it requires a whole of nations approach. We can't leave it to the military and say, look, it's primarily the military's responsibility to fight gray zone warfare. As I said, adversaries will use all elements of national power at their disposal, economic, political, diplomatic, legal, informational. And so we also need a whole of nation approach. And it requires us to strengthen our national resilience. And when I'm saying, talking about national resilience, I'm saying it needs an interagency approach. For your foreign policy, your domestic policy, your internal security policy, your military strategy, media strategy, etc., all have to work towards a common objective. And which is why I'm a very firm believer that we need a national security strategy. It is sometimes said, why is it that we need to openly enunciate our national security strategy? What is the need to put it out in public domain? We also hear arguments like, oh, it's there, but it's like secret. Why I think a clearly stated national security strategy is essential is because we need to bring together all different agencies, different ministries towards a common purpose and common objective. And that can only happen if there is call it a mother document, which is available to everyone and who understand then how they fit into the whole national security scheme. Which is why I think a national security strategy is essential. It also in some ways ties down the government to a holistic approach. Look, this is our stated strategy, And so then you're not adopting sort of ad hoc measures and saying, oh, we have this crisis, now we will deal with it like this. Something else happens, we'll deal with it in some different way. So I think it also ties down the government and different agencies to a steady, holistic, long-term path. We also need to build up our military capabilities to convey a strong deterrent posture. I think clear red lines have to be enunciated. We saw some of this, during the 2016 cross-border surgical strikes and then the Balakot air operation. The idea, frankly, was not that we are going to kill 100 terrorists or 150 terrorists. The idea was to say that, look, you have crossed our red lines, and therefore we are going to respond, and there are going to be costs if you cross these. And while in some ways I think we have laid down our red lines for Pakistan, I don't think we have as much clarity as far as China is concerned. But here again, I think there is a need for us to convey that, these are our red lines, and if these are crossed, because the whole idea of how people, countries use gray zone warfare is gradual escalation, confusing the adversary about how we need to react, what we need to do, should we apply military force or not. But if there is clear, credible communications, then only your strategy of deterrence works. So after all, they say, deterrence is based on 3 C's: credibility, capability, and communication. So you might have the capability, but unless you are credible that you're going to use these, and unless there is clear communication of intent, deterrence is not going to work. We also need a doctrine and strategy for gray zone warfare. Look, this is a new, I won't say new kind of warfare, but it's something that goes beyond merely military force applications. And unless there is clear doctrinal understanding of this, unless we are clearly able to communicate our strategy, I'm not sure we are going to be in a position to be able to combat this properly. And so, who is going to take the lead? Obviously, the military will probably have to take the lead in building this doctrine and strategy. But it has to include all elements of the government. So I don't know if CENJOWS would like to sort of take it on. I think it would be a good project to say we are devising a doctrine to combat gray zone warfare from China and Pakistan. And that, I think, would be a very useful document, not only for the military, but also for the government. We need to look at more seriously at non-kinetic issues like cyber warfare, both to strengthen our defenses and also to develop an offensive strategy. It is clearly understood and accepted that you can build whatever kind of defenses you want, but offensive cyber capacity will always have an edge. The adversary will always find a way to overcome your cyber defenses. So while I'm not saying we should not strengthen our cyber defenses, there is also need to develop good offensive capability. We need to start now again developing strategies for cyber deterrence. How do you deter cyber attacks? Attribution is difficult. Are we going to respond to cyber attacks by only cyber attacks? Are we going to say we are going to use all instruments, including military force, in case there is a massive cyber attack? So these are, again, I think, some clarity is required, some doctrinal and strategic clarity is required in crafting these strategies. Do we have a cyber deterrence strategy in the military? I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen one, but It's been some years since I retired, so maybe there is something. I know we don't have a national cybersecurity strategy. We have been hearing a lot about. We are in the process of preparing a new cybersecurity policy, but I have been hearing this since the last 2-3 years. So as I said, it's time that we come out with these documents and thought processes to be able to tackle the new kind of threats that we are facing. Information warfare is a very, very key element. As I said, information is used to sow confusion, impact decision making by leaders, create disruptions in society. And again, here, I think more national resilience is needed. Sometimes I think we are ourselves creating divisions within society, particularly through the use of social media. You find hate speech, you find misinformation being spread. You see specific communities being targeted, and this creates fissures. Now, every society, whether it's India or US or anywhere else, there are some fissures in society. But I think our attempt should be to try and close those fissures rather than giving opportunities to adversaries to exploit these. Let me give you a very simple sort of example. So there is talk that Russia used, information warfare to a very large extent during the first Trump election. That there was electoral interference by the Russians in the US elections. And if you again go into details about what happened, the themes and narratives that were being created were not that you are trying to create some new issues that were not there in society, but just exploit those that were there. Black Lives Matter, immigrant issues, veteran issues. These were what were amplified. So as I said, there are divisions within society, but we should try and make sure that one, we try and close this gap, and second, that these don't become into such wide chasms that you can't bridge them. So I think it's for all of us. We all play a role in this as part and members of society. We need to create positive stories about ourselves. So that, as I said, divisions cannot be exploited. What are the kind of narratives that we want to push, for example, in Jammu and Kashmir? Do we want to push the narrative that we are going to get rid of terrorists? I'm not saying it's unimportant. Or are we wanting to push the narrative that we want peace in Jammu and Kashmir? And I think a lot of the statements that come out are mostly targeted against terror-free Jammu and Kashmir, and important, as I said. But very few about that we are winning peace in Jammu and Kashmir. So positive stories, positive narratives, I think, are what is required, and we need experts for this. Unfortunately, military officers are there; they're good, but they have their limitations. So when you're looking at really fighting information warfare, you'll have to bring in experts from outside. We also need to use all our diplomatic and legal approaches in fighting this. So use international forums. I think to some extent we have used organizations like the FATF well to put pressure on Pakistan. We need to strengthen our own case. What is the basis on which we are saying this is our border? What is the historical basis for this? Do we have legal ownership documents? Do we have documents proving that grazing rights were given to some of our graziers to go up to certain areas. I think there's very little sort of attention, and I have been saying this, you need to do a detailed documentation check of what documents are available with these very old monasteries, for example, in Ladakh. Because these monasteries were the ones who were sort of controlling grazing rights and exercising some administrative control. We need to look at these things and say, look, we have a historical sort of record of what we claim as our areas along the LAC, for example. And my final point is, we need a cultural shift in our thinking, and it has to start with the military. We are responsible for national security of the country, and therefore it's incumbent on us that we take the lead. Yes, as I said, tackling gray zone warfare requires a whole of nation approach, but the cultural shift, the doctrinal thinking has to start with the military, and for that we need a greater study of new forms of warfare, what threats are emerging, how is it that we are going to tackle them. I sometimes think, and I hope I'm wrong, just too much focus on conventional platforms. We need so many squadrons of aircraft, we need 170 ships, we need so many tanks, we need so many guns. Issues of cyber, information, electronic warfare, I think are not being paid enough attention as they should be. So I will stop here now. 4 minutes short of my time, but that gives you 4 minutes more to ask any questions if you have. Thank you very much.